Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Monday, April the 9th, 2018, moving right along and coming up on 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Hope everybody had a great weekend and a good Monday. We actually have a rather quiet Monday nationwide. We will probably see some activity as we move through the second half of the week. In the east, we're looking forward to a big warm-up in the northern Rockies and northern plains, looking like there could be a bit of a snowstorm there as low pressure comes out of the west. But right now in the west, it is, again, very uneventful. So just real fast, we can look with respect to severe weather risk. And from the Storm Prediction Center, no organized severe thunderstorms are forecast for today, so that's good news. And when we look at the watches and warnings from the Weather Service, really at an absolute minimum with regards to this, we do have some wind advisories up for parts of the southern Rockies and into the into western Kansas. We also have some wind advisories up into parts of North Dakota, and I just want to check what that gold color is from the Weather Service. That's down in parts of Southern California and into parts of Arizona. That gold is actually a high wind watch. We do have do we have any high? Nope. So just the wind advisories up. And that's just about it. So very, very quiet on the weather scene today. I really would love it to stay like this for a little bit, just trying to catch a little bit of a rest here from all the action that we've had. But as I said, things are going to pick up a little bit later on as we move into this week. One thing I want to show you before we get on to what's actually going on at the moment, when we look at the teleconnections here, going forward, because they are rather interesting in that we've got this PNA, Pacific North America Index, going negative, but then bouncing back positive slightly over the weekend before it goes negative again for early next week. We also have the NAO that is going to be trending down toward the neutral line and then going negative, although not crazy negative, but negative as we head into next week. So it does suggest that there will be a little bit of a blocky signature to the pattern going forward into next week. And the EPO goes somewhat positive, although not really off the wall positive, but somewhat positive after today, and stays somewhat positive, although toward the end it does trend down toward neutral. So we're going to me, it looks like, at least for this week, things are looking, the pattern is looking a bit more spring-like, let's call it, because of the fact that we are going to see the jet stream at least change a bit for this week. Weak weather systems dot the surface map at the moment, with low pressure off the South Carolina coast, and then you can see a weak trough in through West Virginia. That's triggering off some snow and rain on the radar across parts of Pennsylvania and into western New Jersey. But much of what's falling there is on the light side. And then as we go out to the west, we've got high pressure up in the west of the northernmost Rockies going west into Idaho and Washington State. So that, at least for the time being, is keeping the next storm off the west coast at bay. And just a kind of a weak stationary front that runs across northern Florida and out into the Gulf of Mexico. So no major storms on either coastline at the moment, which is a nice, well-deserved break for both sides. Now, let's take a look at the radar here in the east, because we do have a little bit of activity going on. And in the green area that you see on the radar, and this kind of matches up with what I'm looking at with surface observations, where we're seeing precipitation actually reaching the ground in places like Harrisburg, Lancaster, Harrisburg, on westward toward State College, Pennsylvania. But again, much of what those stations are reporting is light. When we look at elevated areas above 250 feet, 300 feet, and especially up above 500 feet, you're seeing perhaps a little bit of a heavier precip in terms of some wet snow, and it's probably accumulating in those elevated areas. But a lot of what's on the eastern edge of this is not reaching the ground. I don't see, I saw very little in terms of what the reporting stations, that they're all reporting basically cloudy skies, but nothing really of consequence. So why don't we bring up the GFS? We'll take it forward, see where it's going. We'll start before we even do that. Let's just start with the HRRR model. I think we'll start with that for the local area here around eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, so you can see what's happening. And this is a weak system, a weak upper air disturbance that's going by. I really, there's no real upside here. If anything, there's probably some downside in the sense that this thing could wind up being weaker, a little weaker than what models are forecasting. But when we look at the latest HRRR, and I'll have to go back one run to make it a little bit more effective here because the new one just started. For those of you who don't know, the HRRR model is a very, very short-term model that comes out every hour. So it's constantly updating. But you can see here, at least actually the HRRR is picking up far less than what's on the radar. You can see it here at 21Z. It has the radar reflection pretty well, but then it's just suddenly gone. That seems like, judging from the radar's got showing more than what the HRRR has, but then it kind of comes back during the early morning hours. It's very light stuff. I mean, I guess, some areas in northern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, and in northwestern Connecticut might see the ground whitened up, mainly on colder surfaces and in elevated areas. But that should be about it. And then as we go through the day tomorrow, a lot of this is just going to weaken. There might be one more rain shower to deal with through all of this. And then after that, weather conditions start to improve. So here's the GFS's view tomorrow morning, which is probably a little bit overdone, but then it goes out. So again, I'm not really all that concerned about there being a surprise in some places tomorrow morning. Even if there is one, it would be a very minor surprise. And as soon as it stops, it melts anyway. So we'll start to focus our attention on the West Coast, where a storm is going to be coming inland Tuesday night into Wednesday with some rain and snow, and then a stronger piece will come in Wednesday night into Thursday, and that is going to produce some heavy rains and snows from central and northern California northward. And it's from this that low pressure starts to move out of the northern Rockies. This is by Thursday afternoon. Meanwhile, in the east, you've got a low that's running through the northern lakes with a bit of a warm front ahead of it, and there might be a rain shower with that. But the bottom line is that the high that's off the east coast is going to start bringing up some rather warm air. At least we're going to see temperatures at reasonable levels this time of year toward the end of the week, and probably into the 70s in many locations. But here's that low that moves into the central plains. It's further south on every run. Initially you wanted to take it up through North Dakota, but it looks like there'll be a deep low further south, and you can see some heavy snows being indicated here through much of the eastern half of Montana into western, south, and North Dakota, down into parts of Wyoming and Colorado. I think where you see the dark blue area, if this low translates like this, there probably will be certainly winter storm conditions and maybe even blizzard conditions here across the northern plains later Thursday night and on Friday. Meanwhile, in the east, one of the big issues this time of year is the backdoor cold front issue, and that is something that can sometimes really cut warm-ups off, especially along coastal areas. And from that low, there's a front that extends almost straight eastward across the lower lakes to just about to New York City, or just north of New York City, perhaps to somewhere into southeastern New England by Friday afternoon. That front should push northward, and that will allow temperatures at least to get into the 60s in southern New England and into the 70s by Friday over a good chunk of New Jersey and back down into Pennsylvania. Look where the low is Saturday at this point. I'm sorry, this is Friday night. At this point in eastern Nebraska, still fairly deep. So I'm thinking this is going to be a potential here for a major snowstorm in the northern plains and or from the north central plains northward, let's say, and up into the northern Rockies through Montana, and then that low moves east. Now, going on Saturday here in the east, that frontal boundary is way to the north, and I think that ensures that most areas into southern and even central New England will be seeing temperatures up into the 70s, and it'll probably get into the 80s in the Carolinas. Meanwhile, we should point out that starting on Friday, we're going to probably see a severe weather outbreak across the lower Mississippi Valley and into the Gulf states, Louisiana and East Texas. And that severe weather outbreak will probably continue to some degree on Saturday. That low is still there, spinning away in eastern Iowa. Just basically occludes out there. Heavy snows through Minnesota and parts of the Dakotas. Warm weather here in the east. And this is as far as the new GFS goes, so we're into Saturday night now. That backdoor front is still to the north, but it's probably going to start dropping southward as the frontal boundary shifts east. This low is weakening, and a new low is probably going to form and then move up the Appalachians, the west side of the Appalachians, going into Sunday. So if we back up a run, you'll get a flavor of this. Again, you can see how, at least for Saturday evening, the severe weather threat will shift into the east central Gulf states and on up into eastern Tennessee and Kentucky. Then we have a new low that forms. So at this point here, there's probably a warm front that has developed to the south of New York City. So you're getting the south wind off the ocean up into New England. So that's going to make Sunday a cooler day. And then snow becomes less problematic here as it moves through the western lakes. New system coming into the west with rain and snow there. Then the front begins its approach to the east on Sunday. And at this point, I'm thinking that the threat for severe weather will probably be diminishing as it moves to the east coast. The more impressive areas in terms of severe weather will be to the west. But this is a pretty wrapped up low that's starting to move into upstate New York and eventually gets up into Canada. So there might be some heavy rains with this Sunday night into Monday morning. Colder air follows, and also notice at this point another storm is moving into another low in northeastern Colorado with snows back up through the northern Rockies. This one, as it comes east, doesn't look as formidable as the last one. And when we get into next week, the pattern will have changed again. And we are probably, as we said, with that NAO going negative for next week, we are likely to see a blocky signature to this. So if you're looking for any kind of sustained warmth, it's just not in the cards other than whatever happens late this week. And in fact, look at this upper air. This is for next Wednesday. You've got a bit of a vortex here in eastern Canada, a cold flow coming down from Canada, and it would seem that weather systems moving across will tend to want to go further south per every run. This is something I guess we'll have to pay attention to. But, for you snow lovers out there, I would just point out that, after we get, certainly through the middle of the month, snow in mid to late April, it does happen from time to time, but you could probably count on your hand the number of times it has happened in the last 50 or 60 years. So don't get too excited. For most areas, it's probably done. But here's that blocky signature on the upper air across the polar regions, Greenland up into Western Canada. Low pressure in the upper atmosphere sitting in southeastern Canada. The mean jet pattern is displaced to the south, and it looks to stay that way through a good chunk of the long-range forecast period. Bit of a blocky high that develops in between Greenland and Labrador here. So again, I think the takeaway for me is that when we look at this in the long range, it just doesn't look like this is going to be anything with regards to prolonged warm-ups here in the eastern part of the U.S. Let me come back to the U.S. view, by the way. I just want to show you what the models at least are showing with temperatures, and I really don't have too big a problem with what the models are indicating. There's a cold view for Monday, April 9th. So this is what we just went through, obviously. But as we move into Wednesday, we'll start to see 50s try and move northward. A lot of times the GFS, underdoes this. And by the way, this is a snapshot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not necessarily the highs of the day. But as we move into Thursday, that'll be the first day where you start to see the 60s push up toward New York City. I think the yellow here is probably where you see the yellow is probably a good place for where the boundary of the actual 60-degree highs will be or higher. 70s into Kentucky and Virginia. You start to see some 80s pop up in parts of southeast Georgia, and of course back through Texas and West Texas. It gets pretty warm. And now here's Friday, where you start to see the 70s pushing up into New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and a few pockets of 80s into the southeast. Some low 90s showing up in South Texas. You can see where the cold is in the plains with that storm that's going to be raging out there. And then when we move to Saturday's the day where I think it really warms up well up into the 70s with the frontal boundary in northern New England. You're going to see temperatures in the 70s probably all the way up into central New England. And then up and down the East Coast, we're going to have 70s and some 80s into the Carolinas. Again, the cold air confined to the northern plains at this point. And Sunday, because of the fact that you're going to have this south wind, it'll restrict and clouds and rain, and with showers and possible thunderstorms in some places. You're going to see temperatures get scaled back a little bit. And as we peek into next week with the blocky, or let's call it the blocky signature, that starts to develop after Monday, you're back to daytime temperatures. This is next Tuesday, for example. It's back in the 40s again, with the 30s up in the northern lakes. And as we move into Wednesday, you're looking at 40s to near 50. So temperatures below average again through much of next week. In fact, if we bring you the anomalies, why don't I show you the temperature anomalies? That'll probably reflect this a little bit better. Well, let me just bring it back to, we'll start with Tuesday afternoon. And so here's the, you can see how large the area of below average temperatures is on Tuesday. And then we go into Wednesday, it starts to moderate a bit. Thursday, we begin to see some above normal temperatures appearing, and then by Friday, that area begins to spread out a bit in the eastern part of the U.S., and then certainly on Saturday, much above normal areas concentrated in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Look at the big pool of cooler than average temperatures out in the plains. Sunday, above average ahead of the next cold front. And then starting on Monday, later on Monday, we've got below average temperatures. I'm taking you through all of next week, and you can see it just pretty much is below average throughout much of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and back through the Great Lakes and Midwest. Again, this is because of the fact that the models are showing a bit of a blocky signature for that particular week. Not too much really happening weather-wise in Europe. When we look at the surface map, we do have relatively weak systems here going forward. Storm dropping down now southeastward into Spain and France. Some snow in parts of Spain there. But as far as England and Ireland is concerned, it looks like we're getting kind of typical springtime action here with occasional waves of showers and also some occasional dry periods as well as we go through the next week. Doesn't look like any major storms, although we do have a bit of a high that comes down from northwestern Europe, and that looks like it might set up a bit of a cooler flow as we go into next week as well. So while the blocky signature is impacting the weather in the eastern part of the United States next week, it looks like it'll probably be impacting parts of northwestern Europe and into England and Ireland, though not to the extent of what we saw back in March, which is a good thing. By the way, I did a little playing with the audio, so I'm hoping that you guys can hear me okay. By the way, here's the latest satellite view of what's happening here in the east. And here's the visible satellite. And the sharp edge of the clouds now beginning to move across Long Island into southern New England. There's that little black frame there that's some missing data that seems to have hit a few spots here, including local radar seem to be missing an hour of data. But this is nothing really all that impressive. It's just a very weak system that's moving right along. And one other thing I'll just bring up here too. We'll bring up the national radar, and you can see how relatively quiet it is across the country. You got that little patch in the east, a little patch of moisture off the mid-Atlantic coast, some showers and heavy downpours over northern Florida, a bit of a streak of shower activity in northern Oklahoma, and a bit of action in parts of California and up into parts of Colorado and in through western South Dakota and western Nebraska, and that really is about it. So I'm enjoying the quiet time, by the way. We've been so basically overworked for the month of March in particular into April, being how unrelenting it was. It's nice that we're getting this bit of a break. So let me join you guys on the board here. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm glad the audio is sounding clear. I've been kind of, one of the things when I'm doing all this weather stuff is that I don't really have a whole lot of time to go in there and do all this fine tuning that I have to do technically. So now that I have some of that time with the weather calm, I was able to go in this afternoon and play around with some of the levels and a few of the settings on the program I use. So if you're telling me that everything is good, I am happy to hear that. We want our audio to work out. William Huber, can you say what it would be if March, April happened in December, January, or February? Well, if you seasonally adjust the temperatures, just do the math, and nothing's going to ever translate exactly. But if you want to use the argument that we're 15 degrees below normal now, if you carry that back to December or January, when the average highs are in the middle to upper 30s, you're talking about days where, to make it comparable, it would probably be days where temperatures for daytime highs will be barely back into the low 20s, and nighttime lows down in the single digits, and in inland areas probably below zero. This is a pretty cold air mass for this time of year. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. To see temperatures that aren't getting out of the low to mid 40s is pretty tough. David Fuller, high back. Stephen Franco, high back. Chad Crawford, you've got this dream thing going on with the high winds, but you know what? We are going to see what looks like a major storm in the plains and in the northern Rockies. So let's watch it evolve over the next couple of days, and there will be some severe weather later this week across parts of the South. So this is going to produce some severe weather late this week. We will stay on top of it, and we'll see what happens. But let's see if your dreams are the new forecast model. Let's call it. Super Syed, good to see you here. Haven't seen you in a while. Daniel Yakubov, good to see you here too. James NASCAR fan, and T-Bear. You're snowing there in eastern PA. Is it sticking anywhere? That I'd be curious if it was accumulating. And Shelly Man Studios, yeah, people are still snow lovers. Even the most vocal of snow lovers are contacting me, letting me know that what they've had just simply is not enough. It just needs to snow more. And quite honestly, I've kind of had enough out of this. I'm looking forward to some warmer weather this weekend. I'm hoping to really get out and do a little fishing on Saturday and on Sunday. At least that's the plan. Sean K. Ocean water temperatures are in the low 40s, and you can see how they affect the temperatures in southern New England along the coast and on Long Island, because right now it's temperatures there are actually near the 40-degree mark. The ocean water temperatures have not been able to respond yet, and they're actually running below average off the immediate coast here in my neck of the woods. But ocean water temperatures can turn on a dime, get a few days of a south wind or a south-southeast wind, even better, coming off the Gulf Stream, and that water can warm up in a bit of a hurry. So, before too long, it'll be at 50, and then before too long, it'll be at 60. And yes, I guess all the snow and ice melt. Last thing we need here is a soaking rain of several inches or more because of all the snow that we've had, especially inland. But it certainly brought some of the local lakes and ponds here back to levels that I haven't seen in quite a while because it's been so dry. And a lot of the small streams and rivers will be fishable. Unlike some areas last year, it was a real struggle with the water levels so low, especially in the fall. So let's, I guess we'll call it a day at this point. I hope everybody as I said, hope everybody had a great weekend. We'll look forward to what the weather gods have to bring us later this week as we watch things evolve. By the way, the Colorado State University did come out with its hurricane forecast, forecasting slightly above average activity for this coming season and a slightly above average number of severe hurricanes, Category 3 or higher, based on the fact that the La Nina, it looks like we're going into a Nino neutral situation and no sign of any kind of El Nino coming. So if we have everything kind of normal, that probably argues for an average or slightly above average hurricane season. They did point out that at the moment, ocean water temperatures in the eastern Atlantic are very cool, while ocean water temperatures in the western Atlantic are very warm. But as we said, that could turn quickly over time. So what we have now may not necessarily be what we have at the start of the season. All right, folks, have a great rest of your Monday. We will see you tomorrow. And by the way, there will be a Joe and Joe show tonight on Facebook at 9:15 Eastern Time. And I've been uploading it to my YouTube library. So if you miss it or you're not on Facebook, you can catch it here. With a little luck, I've been able to get that video up into the video library by 10 o'clock. But just in case the time gets away from me, it might not get there until before midnight. So just bear that in mind. Have a great evening, everybody.